They thought a colony was just a name on a star map. To us, it was home. When the alien fleet descended, they did not come to conquer. They came to erase. Cities burned. Children's laughter was drowned in firestorms. Entire bloodlines were turned to ash in a single night. The galaxy expected us to bow our heads, to grieve quietly, to vanish into history as just another forgotten species. But humanity has never been quiet in the face of injustice. Across the stars, we gathered. Farmers, soldiers, engineers, survivors. The last voices of the colony became a battle cry that thundered through every human heart. We did not ask for war. But once it came to our doorstep, we carried it back to theirs. What followed was not just retaliation. It was a storm unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Because when you burn a human world, do you truly understand the fire you awaken? The colony of Ashira Prime was not a battlefield. It was a dream. On its wide plains, wheat bent like golden oceans under twin suns. Children raced through fields that seemed endless, their voices carrying through the air like songs. The capital, Marrow's Reach, was no fortress of stone and steel, but a sprawl of glass towers threaded with gardens and streams. And at the center of it all was Commander Elias Vera. Not a commander of fleets, though the uniform still hung pressed in his closet, but a man who had chosen peace. After 2 decades in Earth's Navy, he had settled here with his wife, his young daughter, and the hope of a quiet life. He taught history at the colony's academy. He spent his evenings fixing old farm machinery, swapping war stories with neighbors who had never seen a battlefield. For the first time in years, Elias believed humanity had finally outrun the shadow of war. But shadows have a way of catching up. Reports came first as whispers, cargo freighters vanishing on the outer lanes, distress signals cut short mid-broadcast. Elias brushed them aside. Out here, pirates and smugglers were nuisances, not existential threats. Still, old instincts kept him awake at night. He found himself scanning the skies, counting patrols, listening for something in the silence. His wife laughed gently at his caution, reminding him, "This is a place for beginnings, Elias, not endings." And then came the day that proved her wrong. It began with a rumble that shook windows across the valley. People rushed outside, craning their necks, expecting an earthquake. But the tremors came from above. The sky split with streaks of violet fire, alien vessels breaking through orbit, their hulls bristling with weaponry no human engineer had ever seen. They did not hail, did not declare demands, did not even pause to broadcast intent. They came with one purpose. Elias grabbed his daughter and ran, alarms screaming through the colony's streets. Around him, neighbors cried out in confusion. Some prayed, others tried to flee to the spaceport. But the first barrage erased that hope. Plasma lances carved through the runways, turning ships to molten slag before they could rise. Marrow's Reach, once a city of glass and gardens, became a furnace. Elias fought to reach the emergency bunkers, the memory of war hammering back into his blood. He knew what precision looked like. And this was not precision. It was extermination. From the corner of his vision, he saw towers collapse, heard the screams of thousands swallowed by fire. Somewhere in the chaos, he lost sight of his wife. He shouted her name until his voice was raw, but the roar of destruction drowned everything. By the time Elias stumbled into the bunkers with his daughter clutched to his chest, the colony was already dying. He pressed her against him, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Above, the alien ships scoured the planet clean, painting the sky with firestorms that could be seen from orbit. Ashira Prime, once a beacon of humanity's future, was reduced to ash. Elias lived. But survival did not feel like mercy. It felt like a demand. Because as the bunkers sealed and silence fell, he understood what had been done. This was not a war for territory, not piracy, not conquest. It was erasure, a deliberate attempt to wipe out a world simply because it was human. And that kind of crime demands an answer. What the aliens had unleashed that day was not just grief, not just rage. They had awoken something far greater, something that had slept too long in the blood of our species. Humanity would answer. And across the stars, the galaxy would remember that answer forever. The survivors of Ashira Prime numbered fewer than 2,000. From the bunkers, they were ferried up to orbit, one shuttle at a time, faces pale against the dark, their eyes still reflecting firestorms they could not unsee. Elias Vera stood among them, his daughter's hand locked in his, jaw tight with the kind of fury that silence conceals, but never kills. When the transport reached the edge of Earth's command territory, the news spread like wildfire across the human diaspora. Broadcasts carried it through every channel, every colony, every orbital station. Ashira Prime was gone. The reaction was not disbelief, not horror, not even shock. It was anger. For too long, humanity had been dismissed as an emerging species, a people tolerated at the galactic table but never feared, never respected. Ashira Prime's destruction was meant as a reminder: stay small, stay silent. Instead, it became a spark. The Council of Earth met in emergency session. The chamber was filled with voices demanding action, colonists shouting for vengeance, diplomats pleading for caution, generals listing fleet strengths like a litany of fire. At the center of it all, Elias Vera stood, no longer a quiet teacher, but a soldier once more. His voice did not rise in fury, but in something colder. "They didn't come to conquer," he said. "They didn't come to negotiate. They came to erase us. And if we don't answer, then every colony, every settlement, every child asleep under a human sky will be next." Some argued humanity lacked the numbers to retaliate. Others spoke of diplomacy, of bargaining for survival. Elias cut through them with words sharp as steel. Diplomacy only works when your enemy believes you have the strength to fight. Ashira Prime was their message. Now we send one of our own. And in that silence, humanity's course was set. Earth's shipyards burned with activity. Old war hulks, relics of border skirmishes, were dragged from dry dock and reforged. Civilian haulers were retrofitted into gun platforms. Engineers worked sleeplessly, welding and calibrating. Factories turned from plows to plasma cannons. But ships alone would not be enough. The alien fleet had been vast, armed with technology humanity barely understood. Direct confrontation risked annihilation. Humanity's strength, Elias argued, was not in matching firepower for firepower. It was in thinking differently. So humanity leaned on what had always carried it forward: ingenuity. Scouts mapped the alien supply lines. Mathematicians predicted jump routes. Farmers donated fuel reserves. Hackers rewrote code to hijack alien signals, planting false coordinates, luring fleets into ambushes. Small units struck first, hitting lightly guarded outposts, seizing alien weapons to study. Every battle won was more than survival. It was learning. And as Elias trained with the growing fleet, he spoke words that became a rallying cry. They thought burning one colony would break us. Instead, it has united us. Now, we carry that fire back to them. The first retaliatory strike came at Rhinell Station, a key resupply hub for the alien fleets. Human scouts approached silent, hidden behind debris fields, their signatures masked by experimental dampeners. At the signal, a flotilla of corvettes leapt from FTL, disgorging torpedoes packed with repurposed mining explosives. The alien garrison barely had time to raise shields before the station tore open like a ruptured vein. Supplies ignited. Dozens of ships caught in port went up with it, scattering wreckage across the void. The galaxy watched in disbelief. Humans had not defended their own. They had carried the war to enemy ground. But this was only the beginning. The aliens responded with fury. Their fleets doubled patrols, raiding nearby colonies to draw humanity back into defense. But Elias anticipated it. He scattered the human fleet, ordering smaller cells to strike and vanish before counterattacks arrived. They hit fuel depots, destroyed navigation beacons, jammed communications. They fought not for territory, but to bleed the enemy slowly, relentlessly. One alien commander, caught on intercepted transmissions, spat in disbelief. "They fight like fire, everywhere at once. You stamp it out here and it rises there. How do you kill what refuses to die?" For the first time, humanity had turned perception to its advantage. The galaxy had seen humans as fragile. Now they saw them as unpredictable, unstoppable, unyielding. Months into the war, intelligence revealed the alien fleet's command carrier, the Venar Ascendant, would be crossing the Helios Rift, a narrow corridor of navigable space. The plan Elias proposed was audacious, bordering on madness. "Lure them into the rift," he said. "Box them in, cut off their retreat, and then—" His eyes burned with cold fire. "We burn them." The council hesitated. The fleet was still outnumbered. A misstep could mean extinction. But survivors of Ashira Prime filled the chamber, their voices steady. "We have already lost everything once. We will not lose it again." The plan was approved. The trap was set with precision. Human ships feigned weakness, fleeing before alien patrols, leaving false trails. The aliens, overconfident from centuries of dominance, pursued with their command fleet. When the Venar Ascendant entered the rift, the jaws closed. From the shadows of asteroid fields, human ships emerged, unleashing volleys of plasma fire. Torpedo waves ripped into alien escorts. Mines detonated along pre-marked vectors, cutting escape routes. Elias's flagship, the Resolute, drove headlong into the fray, its guns roaring. At his command, the fleet's hidden ace was revealed. Massive solar mirrors, deployed from converted freighters, focusing the light of Helios's twin stars into lances of searing energy. The rift became a crucible. Alien hulls melted, shields collapsed. The Venar Ascendant struggled, surrounded, its engines failing. For a moment it seemed victory was certain. And then the aliens unveiled their own weapon. A sphere of black energy blossomed from the carrier's core, a gravitational implosion that tore human ships into fragments. The Resolute bucked violently as warning klaxons screamed. Half the fleet was caught in the pull, ripped apart in an instant. The line trembled. Commanders screamed for retreat, but Elias's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold the line! Ashira burns behind us! Hold the line!" Desperation birthed genius. A young engineer aboard the Resolute, barely 20 years old, realized the alien weapon overloaded whenever its field expanded. If they could feed it too much energy, it might collapse upon itself. The idea was madness. Overcharge the sphere until it consumed its own core. It would mean sending ships directly into its pull, their reactors set to detonate. Elias didn't hesitate. He looked around the bridge, saw the faces of men and women who had lost homes, families, everything. He gave the order. Volunteers answered without pause. Gunships, transports, even damaged cruisers broke formation and drove into the gravity well, their reactors screaming into overload. One by one, they vanished in blinding eruptions, hammering the sphere with cascading surges. And then, with a final shriek of tearing space, the weapon collapsed inward, consuming the Venar Ascendant in a storm of black fire. The alien command fleet died with it. Silence filled the comms. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only wreckage drifted through the rift, human, alien, all mingled. Then a single voice broke through. "The Ascendant is gone." We held the line. The fleet erupted in shouts, tears, fists raised to the stars. Across human space, broadcasts carried the news. Humanity had not only fought back, they had destroyed the enemy's greatest weapon. But victory came at a cost. Half the human fleet was gone. Thousands of lives burned in sacrifice. Elias stood on the bridge, hands clenched behind his back, knowing that the price of vengeance was steep. And yet, in that silence, he knew the war was not over, because the galaxy was watching. The aliens were not broken yet, and humanity, bloodied but unbowed, was preparing the next firestorm. The enemy fleet filled the void like a living storm, thousands of ships blotting out the distant stars, their weapons humming with enough power to erase entire worlds. For a heartbeat, silence ruled the command deck of the Resolute. Every sensor confirmed what they already knew. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and standing on the knife's edge of extinction. Commander Elias stood at the viewport, the reflection of the galaxy's most lethal armada burning in his eyes. His crew looked to him, not because he was invincible, but because he was human, and humanity had a way of turning the impossible into inevitability. "All batteries ready," his weapons officer whispered, voice trembling. Elias's hand tightened around the console. "No, not yet." The alien fleet advanced, their formation perfect, mechanical, unyielding. But humans had never fought like machines. They fought like fire. At his signal, hidden mines detonated across the starfield, tearing holes in the enemy's advance. Entire wings of alien ships shattered into debris. But the aliens adapted, reforming with ruthless efficiency. The battle became chaos. Flashes of light, screams across comms, hulls splitting open to the void. The Resolute took hit after hit, shields collapsing, armor groaning. Fire spread through the decks, and still the crew fought on. A young ensign, blood streaking down her face, shouted over the din, "We can't hold much longer!" Elias knew she was right. And yet, he keyed the final command, one the enemy could never predict. The human fleet had prepared a weapon, not of brute strength, but of brilliance, a chain reaction igniting the gas giant at the system's edge. As the aliens pressed their assault, the planet itself began to tremble, then erupt, an ocean of fire and fury blooming into space. Shockwaves hurled ships aside like toys, consuming entire fleets. On the bridge, every human watched as the impossible unfolded. Their world might burn, their fleet might fall, but in this moment, this single, defiant heartbeat, they had changed the war. Elias whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "They thought we'd die on our knees. They never understood. Humanity fights standing." And as the inferno swallowed the alien armada, a question lingered in every survivor's mind. If humans could wield the fury of a star, what else were they capable of? The silence after the battle was deafening. Space, once alive with the screams of engines and the fire of war, now lay littered with the shattered remains of ships, alien and human alike. Drifting hulls glowed faintly, silent memorials to the chaos that had unfolded. And in that silence, humanity breathed again. Elias sat in the command seat, eyes hollow yet alight with something fierce, something indomitable. His hands still trembled from issuing the final order, the command that turned their last reserves into an unstoppable tide of fire. They had been outnumbered, cornered, written off by the galaxy itself, and yet, against logic, against fear, they stood. Reports streamed in from across the fleet, ships damaged but alive, crews bloodied but unbroken, colonies reaching out with grateful, trembling voices. Humanity had not only survived the onslaught, it had answered with such force, such fury, that even the most arrogant alien warlords would whisper the name of Earth with caution. But victory came with scars. Too many faces were missing from the screens. Too many names now carried only in memory. Elias felt the weight of every one of them. They hadn't fought for glory. They had fought for family, for survival, for the simple truth that no one erases humanity without consequence. As the surviving fleet began its slow return, the galaxy watched, some in fear, some in awe, some in silence, realizing too late the storm they had awakened. Humanity had proven a truth older than the stars themselves. Fragile though they seemed, their spirit was unbreakable. And in that unbroken spirit lay a warning and a promise. They were not conquerors. They did not seek empires. But when pushed to the edge, when forced to defend what was theirs, humanity would answer with fire, and the cosmos would never forget it. Because in the end, it was never just about vengeance. It was about survival, about love for the lost and hope for the living, about proving that humanity, small, stubborn, and unstoppable, was here to stay. And as the wreckage of war drifted into the void, one truth echoed across the stars. They had tried to erase humanity. Instead, they had carved humanity's legend into the galaxy forever.